Now, the two most hotly anticipated movies of the summer, opening this week, Oppenheimer and Barbie, would seem to have little in common. But one thing they do have is their shared focus on two of the most significant items of the 20th century, the atomic bomb and the Barbie doll, which were both largely the creations of Jews. Earlier, I spoke about Oppenheimer and the issues it raises with a physicist who worked at the facility in Los Alamos where the A-bomb was invented and later became the rabbi of that community in New Mexico. Joining us now for more is Rabbi Jack Shlachter, former physicist at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, a rabbi at the Los Alamos Jewish Center, and he joins us from that town in New Mexico. Thank you for joining us, Rabbi Shlachter. First of all, a word about yourself. How does a rabbi end up working as a physicist at the very laboratory where Robert Oppenheimer oversaw the creation of the atomic bomb?
I guess I thought all physicists should be rabbis and work at national laboratories. No, I came to Los Alamos as a physicist, and my connection to Judaism strengthened as I started to learn more about Judaism, and so I became a rabbi down the road while I was a physicist.
Well, it's interesting because so many Jews were, including Robert Oppenheimer, Albert Einstein, many others, were involved either in the physics that led to the creation of the atomic bomb or the actual project there in Los Alamos. What do you think that is? Is there a connection between being Jewish or Judaism and physics?
That's a wonderful question. I actually think there is a connection. I believe that Judaism is a challenging set of teachings, if you will. The Talmud, of course, is filled with arguments, and looking at the world as a physicist means challenging assumptions, trying to uncover what the underlying principles are, and that seems to me to be perfectly compatible with Judaism. So physics and Judaism, to me, really do go hand in hand. This idea of questioning things, of trying to understand principles. So I don't think it was such a surprise that so many of the physicists who worked on the Manhattan Project were Jewish.
Right. Now, Robert Oppenheimer was not a religious Jew. Many of those other scientists were not. Some were quite assimilated. But how much do you think it was a factor they felt as Jews, in a sense, in a race with Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany in the need to create an atomic bomb?
Yes, I think you are correct that it was clear to Jewish scientists, probably more than to anyone else, that Jews were in great danger should Adolf Hitler succeed in developing the bomb ahead of the United States. And some of the scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project fled Europe, so many of them were refugees. I think they understood quite well what the dangers of Nazism was.
Now, Robert Oppenheimer, I said he was not a religious Jew, but he seems to have had a spiritual side. There's that famous quote where he quotes Indian lore when he sees the Trinity test, "I am Shiva, the destroyer of worlds." What was in any way, his Jewishness, and maybe how that influenced or impacted him?
I think that Oppenheimer grew up in a household where Judaism was the ethnic connection, but it wasn't what we might call a religious connection. The family was very immersed in the ethical culture society that was developed by Felix Adler. Oppenheimer himself was schooled in the ethical culture school. So I think Jewishness was there in the background, but you're right. He did not practice Judaism, I guess would be one way to say it.
Right. Now, the movie Oppenheimer is going to deal with some degree with the morality of dropping the atomic bombs on Japan. My father was actually in the Philippines in the summer of 1945 getting ready for the invasion of Japan. He always told me that Harry Truman saved his life by deciding to drop the bombs. What do you think about the morality, as we look at it, of the dropping those two bombs on Japan?
Obviously, a very challenging question that you pose, but you are correct. My father, the story I understand is that my father was back from Europe after VE Day, back in the United States, waiting to be shipped out to the Pacific. And he also felt that dropping the bomb on Japan saved his life. I don't know that I have any great insights on the moral ambiguities. It's also much easier to be the Monday morning quarterback. I think in the fog of war, the Japanese clearly were our enemy, and there was great worry that many soldiers would die in the process of trying to defeat Japan.
This movie Oppenheimer, I think it's going to awaken a lot of Americans, especially young Americans, who've completely forgotten about Robert Oppenheimer, what an immense contribution, either for good or bad, that he made as a physicist, as a veteran of Los Alamos. I presume that's something you would like to see, so people should know his story better.
I think his story is a very important story. I focused over the last few months on his Jewish connection because that's one area that I think maybe wasn't being in reminding people about the importance of that era. The Manhattan Project was an astounding situation, unprecedented. It in some sense created large-scale science. I think that the movie will prompt people to think through some issues that maybe have been suppressed for a while.
Right, and also remind people of the injustice that was done him by having his security clearance taken away from him during the McCarthy era, something that the government a couple of years ago actually restored to him posthumously. So it's doing some.
Well, they didn't really restore the clearance. My understanding is that they said that the whole proceeding was flawed, and they did what's called vacating the decision. But I think that's an important dimension of the story because it gives it the tragic arc. I think if Oppenheimer was the most visible, famous scientist, I think, probably, certainly in the country, possibly the world after World War II. And he was an eloquent spokesperson on scientific topics. And then the tragedy in 1954 of his having his clearance revoked, I think gives the story that tragic arc that makes it so compelling. I don't know that this would be such a gripping movie had he just lived out the rest of his life to a natural end. I think he really was quite broken by that situation, and certainly physically looked like it had taken a huge toll on him. And I think that's part of what will make the movie and the story capture people's attention.
All right. Well, I don't know if you're aware of the Oppenheimer versus Barbie debate in popular culture. I guess, like me, we're going to be watching Oppenheimer first. Rabbi Jack,
I will tell you, I bought my tickets for the Oppenheimer movie. I have not bought my tickets for the Barbie movie.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Rabbi Jack Shlachter, thank you for joining us on Jewish World Weekly.
Thank you.